Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. I am your host, author, coach, and healer, Andy Grant. Please visit theandygrant.com to learn more about that. Real Men Feel exists to remind men that they are human beings and they have the right to experience and express all of their emotions. We have the conversations that most men aren't having, but that all men can benefit from. While 2023 is still a very fresh year, I'm reminded of the opening of A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, and we were all going direct the other way. Now, to me, that can describe today as well as when it was written in 1859. So I find myself wondering, how might someone step up to serve the light, to add to the wisdom, to create the best of times? My guest today is Christian de la Huerta. With 30 years of experience, Christian is a sought-after spiritual teacher, personal transformation coach, and leading voice in the breathwork community. He has traveled the world offering inspiring and transformative retreats combining psychological and spiritual teachings with lasting and life-changing effects. His newest book, Awakening the Soul of Power, has won multiple awards and was described by Grammy Award winner Gloria Estefan as a balm for the soul of anyone searching for truth and answers to life's difficult questions. Welcome to Real Men Feel, Christian.
Hey, Andy, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. And wow, what a beautiful reading you started us out with.
Yeah, I think everyone remembers, best of times, worst of times. I went to look it up and make sure. I'm like, oh, there's a whole wonderful paragraph that, since high school I've forgotten.
Yeah, me too. I've forgotten what a beautiful way that begins.
Yeah. And I feel like, again, at the dawn of a new year, probably every year is like that. You have the opportunity to go both ways, for the best, for the worst, to see the light, to see the darkness. And what I really like about your work and your message is that call to make the choice, to decide for yourself, to add value to the world, to be a hero to the world or not. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It's that your reading resonated so much with me because I do believe that we're in those kind of really critical times. I believe we're like make it or break it times. The planet will be fine. It might take several million years, but life will continue. The planet will find homeostasis again. Consciousness will continue evolving. Who knows? Maybe it turns out to be an enlightened cockroach planet. Whether we make it, that's what we're beginning to face. We're just now beginning to witness and to experience whatever it is that we have unleashed on the environment, of which COVID is a symptom of our relationship to nature. So if anybody watching this has the slightest inkling, the slightest suspicion that they have teachers, as healers, as activists and promoters of change, this is it. This is the time that we've been waiting for.
Yeah. Cool. And so you write a lot and speak a lot about personal power and heroism. Have you always felt that sense of your own heroic self?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? I struggled with owning, that word hero, or even owning the word of teacher. My adolescence was one long depression. I know self-doubt. In fact, I know self-hatred. And I also know how you can get out of it, right? Because that's, flash forward to today, no matter what doesn't, whether a project succeeds or it fails, in quotes, never, ever, ever do I question my sense of self. My self-worth is unshakable. And so I know that can happen to me, it can happen in anybody. And that's part of what my work is about, is helping people to that level of empowerment and freedom.
So you mentioned your childhood was just really a long depression, and I know you don't have a traditional childhood. So tell me a bit about your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Cuba, and I lived in a communist regime for the first 10 years of my life, and so I always kind of felt like the outsider, like something like I didn't belong. When we came to the States, we lived in Georgia, rural Georgia, Milledgeville, Georgia, for the first 3 years. And I didn't speak a word of English. So really, felt different. Really never felt that I belonged there either. And in Cuba, the minute that your family applied for a visa to emigrate, to leave, you were labeled gusano, which means worm, like even by the teachers in, first, second, third grade. And then once I'd finally learned English and had this great Southern accent, we moved back to Miami, where, went to a Jesuit high school that was probably 95% Cuban American. So I stood out again all over because I sounded like a Georgia peach. So yeah, I think that theme of feeling different, of feeling like the other, has been prevalent in me all my life, and challenging for sure growing up. And there's a lot of wisdom and value that comes from that, from feeling different, from not belonging. To me, though, all of it was part of what helped me become who I am today.
So today, how would you define heroism?
That's how I start the book, because like me, I know many people struggle with the word heroism. In fact, I had a couple of publishing, writing consultants who said, no, don't put that word, because people don't know what to do with that. And the reason for that is because it's really easy for us to project that outside and to honor, heroism in somebody else, like a warrior, a first responder, an EMT, firefighters. The pandemic, I think, helped us to expand that a little bit. So now most of us, I think, would include our healthcare practitioners, our doctors, our nurses, our respiratory therapists, who really place their lives at risk. And I would even include in there grocery store clerks and delivery people who, in the worst of it, made a lot of sacrifices to keep the rest of us fed and provided for and taken care of. And then the question becomes, well, what about the rest of us? And so what I write in this book is like ways of living that are nothing less than heroic. So for example, it's really easy to react, and when somebody says or does something that we interpreted as painful, and to get them back and to say something back to them or take revenge on them. Anybody can do that. To take a pause, to take a deep breath, to feel the ouch, and choose otherwise, like actually just bringing choice back into the equation, to me is heroic. To splatter somebody against the wall, anybody can do that. To take the higher road, it's a different story here. To walk around rather than to be willing to dive deep inside and to face our inner demons, our shadow stuff, rather than going through life, just numbing out like most of us do, and self-medicating with substances and food and sex and gaming and social media and workaholism and all of the ways in which we are so creatively numb out and run away from our feelings. Like your podcast often talks about, to be willing to do that, to learn how to feel. Like if you would have asked me 30 years ago what I was feeling, I had no idea. I couldn't tell you because I had no idea. And so we've got this whole misunderstanding that to feel is weakness. And I think it's the other way around, to know what we're feeling and to learn how to communicate those feelings responsibly, like owning that there are feelings and nobody can make us feel anything. In a way with courage, because it's always going to take courage to communicate that, compassion in the moment, and communicate them gracefully, meaning in a way that the other person can hear it, not just dumping them like a 2-year-old, and pointing the finger and blaming them, which is only going to cause a shutdown on the other side. To me, that's nothing short of heroic.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you said, going inward, because I certainly didn't realize this while I was growing up, but I've come to really realize and experience that my greatest fears are in me. Like, it was easy to blame and look around, but that's the easy stuff. But yeah, it took a shitload of courage to be willing to look at my own personal darkness, and why am I so depressed, and why do I think I'm better off dead? And it's all in us. our darkness and our light is in us, and
Yeah.
our heroism and our victim is all inside of us. And that's why I love how you're saying that heroism is really pausing and making that choice.
Yes.
Because we all do have that power to choose.
Always.
Yeah. Cool.
Always. And to me, that's also heroic, just to pop ourselves out of that old and boring react and regret cycle, right? Because we react because somebody got us, somebody said something that was hurtful, and so we get them back. But what happens? You know, the adrenaline dissipates. An hour later, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. That was so mean. That's not what I really wanted to say, and we cause harm to other people and to our relationships. And ultimately, we don't really want it to be that way, but it's the way that we've been conditioned, and it's kind of what happens, as you know, when we suppress our emotions. What used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics, it's all energy. That includes the body, that includes the emotions. We know from physics too that energy cannot be destroyed. So all those times, those countless times that we have stuffed our emotions, that we have suppressed them because we didn't feel safe, because little boys don't cry, because we didn't want to be perceived as weakness, because we didn't want to rock the boat too much, and so we wanted to maintain that illusion of peace. That stuff doesn't go away. It gets lodged in the tissues of the body. And what happens is that after years and decades of suppressing emotions, a lifetime in some of our cases, we walk around with layers and layers and layers of repressed emotional crap and unhealed past trauma, which we then start projecting. We're trying to have a relationship in the present moment, and all of it is getting filtered through all that unhealed stuff. Like, to me, it's amazing. It's mind-boggling that any relationships can work, because we haven't been taught like how to hold them, how to approach them, and we haven't been taught about clearing our stuff so that we stop, throwing it on each other's lap. And yeah, go ahead.
I often say that every emotion will be felt. Yeah. And if it's something we stuff, it's going to come out sideways and distorted and in response to something that has nothing to do with the original trauma, incident, whatever that feeling was, yet you decided to suppress. So
right. And especially for guys, because one of the things that I get into the book is I have a chapter that's all about what it means to be a man in the 21st century, because this conflicted, ambivalent relationship we've had with power for the several, 1,000 years of the patriarchy, which is more power about hierarchy, about my way or the highway, cowboy mentality, power related to fear, force, domination, control. I'm going to push you down and step on you in order for me to feel powerful. Look, of course, women and the feminine have paid a price for that. The feminine energies have paid a price for that, but so have men. And so do men still. To me, that's one of the reasons why the mortality rate is so different. Like in the US, women outlive men by 5 years. Globally by 7 years. And I think that part of the reason for that is because we've got this mistaken idea of what it means to be a man. And so we walk around like these uncaring, unfeeling robots, and those energies have to come out one way or the other. So they start showing up as physical symptoms, as illness, disease, cancer, heart attacks, ulcer. And it's part of the reason why we're so unhappy too, because it's such a limited and limiting perspective of what it means to be a man.
So what is the healthiest, most fulfilling way to express masculinity today?
That's a great question. That's part of what I did in that chapter, is look at some of the traditional ways in which we associate as traditional male roles, and kind of update them, redefine them for the 21st century. So let's look at one of them, the provider. It's such a part of the identity for so many of us as guys. The one who brings home the bacon. But if we look at the numbers, I think the last numbers that I have are for 2017. I need to get the more recent figures. But in 2017, in 40% of heterosexual households in the US, the woman has higher income, is bringing in more than the man. And 50% More than 50% of college graduates are now women. So we can see which way this is going. Followed by men, we're being replaced by robotics and computers and outsourced by globalization. And so no wonder that so many men are having an identity crisis. If I'm not the provider, then who am I? And so no wonder that there's so many men who are having a crisis right now. I think that I was reading a couple of days ago, 8 million men in the US have just given up. They're not even trying to find a job when there are plenty of jobs available to be had. And no wonder that so many men are wanting to go back to the way that it was in the 50s, this idealized version of life in the 50s. And so, it's like I look at that as like, what about a different way of what it means to provide? Like, that's it. Are we really going to define ourselves as men by the size of our paycheck? It's like, wow, that's really limiting. If that's what you think of yourself and your role and who you are as a human being, that's by the size of your paycheck. Yikes. But so many of us do. And so for example, another way that we can express that, what about providing for your family, for your household, for your loved ones, a safe environment where psychologically, emotionally safe, where everybody can just blossom, and that role is the rock, and that's always gonna have your back, and then all of our kids, our family can just blossom and explore with who they are, and that is priceless. To be able to have that is priceless, infinitely more valuable than the size of the contribution of a paycheck.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I have never met anyone that talks about their experiences as a child and their dad, like, oh yeah, and payday was the favorite, and he'd show us his check and we all celebrated. But it's all about, being a provider of love and joy, and that's what makes the positive memories and the tight family and can change the world for the better. Exactly. Or
the explorer, it's another traditional role that men have played, is the explorer. And at least on this little planet, we're running out of places to explore, unless you go deep into the ocean or far into outer space. But what about exploring yourself? What about what you were just talking about? Being willing to dive in and explore, like to face our shadow, to face our fears, face our inner demons. That is heroic. That is the stuff of heroes.
Yeah. And let me know if you're seeing this. I'm seeing more men doing that, and younger and younger. Like the newest generation seem willing to dive in at much earlier ages, and that really gives me hope for everything. So in the book, you speak about soulful power often. So could you define soulful power?
Yeah, and let me zoom out a little bit to talk a little bit more about, to set the context for it. I think most of us have an ambivalent, and I would even say conflicted, relationship to power. Part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it. And I think, the more that I dive into this in retreats and with coaching clients, I think what we fear is that if we really stepped into our power, into all of who we are, that other people might not be able to accept it, to handle it, and that we might end up rejected, alone. And who wants that? I think we also fear that we might abuse it. And no wonder, how many times throughout our lives have we witnessed and experienced abuses of power? And then on top of that, we've been corrupted. We've been influenced and conditioned to believe that power's bad, that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And what good-hearted person wants to be corrupted? So when you add to the mix the fact that we have also been conditioned that the emotions and feelings are bad and weakness, we hate conflict, we avoid confrontation. What happens is that we end up giving away our power. We end up selling out on our innate, inherent power that nobody can give to us, nobody can take away. We are the only ones who give it away. And what I find most tragic about that is the reasons for which we give it away. So how many times have we said yes when inside we really feel no? Like inside it's really not okay with us. But we settle for that illusion of peace, for an illusion of acceptance, a false sense of security. And we settle for morsels, crumbs of pseudo love. So I don't think it's a very healthy and effective strategy to give away our power. So part of the journey then to beginning to reclaim our power is realizing that there's different types. So I talk about worldly power, the way that the world relates to power, or ego power, the way that that ego part of us expresses power in the world, which is that hierarchical power over approach, which, and I can contrast that to soulful power, which is, to me, call it spiritual power, inner power, authentic power, whatever you want to call it. It's so there are key differences. So, for example, a few of them. Worldly power is all about externals. So we tend to associate power with people who have money, fame, who are high up in some kind of hierarchy, whether it's the corporate ladder or some other kind of structure. But the thing about all those kinds of power is that because they're outside of us, they're fickle. Here today, gone tomorrow. So contrasting that with the inner power, which, like I was saying before, is like it's there. Nobody can give it to us, and we are the only ones who give it away. Nobody can really take it away from us. The worldly power is all about agenda. So it's always trying to get something for itself. And it's always trying to prove how big and powerful it is. So it's all about facades and being perceived as. Whereas soulful power, it's humble. Like, it doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. It knows how much power it has, and it doesn't need validation by anybody. It's internally referenced, internally validated. So I think of a Gandhi or Gandalf, if you're into the Lord of the Rings, in their simple monastic robes, their sandaled feet. From looking at them, you'd never know how much power they hold. But when it's needed, get out of the way. If we think about it, Gandhi brought the British Empire to its knees when it was at its highest point in terms of global influence and global reach, without ever shooting a gun or landing a single punch. That's power. And we all have access to that.
Beyond taking an empire down, what are some more practical, realistic, down to earth, your individual life? What are some examples of being in that soulful power place?
Oh my God. It's what I was just saying before, like getting to that place where you no longer need anyone's approval or validation. That's powerful. That's being in your personal agency, self-sufficiency. Not that we don't have other relationships that are deeply meaningful, but we're not needing anybody's approval or validation, which is incredibly empowering. To be able to navigate power struggles, right? So rather than the way that most of us have done it, which is all of this stuff gets subconscious, we're projecting on each other all of our self-doubts, the not feeling good enough, the I'm not worthy, but we don't want to face that stuff. So we overcompensate for those things because they're too uncomfortable to look at. And so then we get caught up in egoic power struggles. Like, I say this, you say that. I say this, you say that. Boom, until one of us explodes, and then we cause harm to our relationships. So by being willing to go inside and understand why we do the things we do, what are our triggers, what are our patterns, why do certain people trigger me, or certain type of relationships trigger me and trigger my self-doubt or my insecurity, by being willing to do that, we can do something about it. Because we can't do anything about what we can't see. And once we begin to do that healing work and that work of realizing, it's like, wait a minute, all those feelings of not feeling good, of inadequacy, that there's something wrong with me, they're just misunderstandings of a young mind that didn't know any better. Incredibly empowering, incredibly liberating. And then, we have relationships that work better, because we can stand in our power, not threatened by anybody else's power. So we don't have to get stuck in those power struggles, with very healthy boundaries, very clear boundaries. We know what works for us, what doesn't work for us. If we need to, we take a stand for ourselves. But we don't have to walk around with those layers and layers of armor that may have served at some point in our lives, but now they're just keeping us in that prison. We walk around, especially as guys, like in his huge armors, thinking that's powerful. That's not powerful. That's prison. Right? We walk around in DEFCON 1, just waiting for the next shoe to drop, waiting for the next attack, sometimes sneaking in the first punch just in case. What a way to live, right? If we think about it, this relationship to life is much more powerful, because I'm coming from a place that I know that, hey, life, come at me. Whatever you throw at me, I got this.
Right. So
I got this.
There's a resilience and a bravery and the courage to go within. So
yes.
Is there any ideal first step to help someone make that start to make that switch from the egoic power to more in touch with their soul?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it right now. First part is understanding that, what we've been doing and our misunderstandings. So it's to go back to what we were talking about earlier, go within. That's the first step. Yeah. Becoming self-aware, because again, we can't do anything if we're not aware of what we're doing. So figuring out why we do the things we do.
Without awareness, nothing can change. So that's whenever I'm talking with clients and they realize, oh, I did that, and like, oh, celebrate that you noticed something. In the past, you were just unconsciously doing those things that now you don't like. So
exactly.
that's a win.
It's a total win. It's definite progress.
Yeah. Cool. And in your own experience, was there some with journaling, meditation, like what helped you go within when you first realized something's off and I want to do something about it?
Well, I've always been kind of introspective, more of an introvert, which, there's a book called The Introvert Advantage. And from current perspective, I see that now, because I was asking, difficult, challenging questions about myself at an early age. So I kind of had a head start in that area. In terms of practices, the one that really changed my life was breathwork. And we don't have time to really get into breathwork here. It's a large umbrella term. There's breathing practices and breathing techniques that have a lot of benefits. The type of breathwork that I'm doing is you breathe in a certain way, in a circular, connected way, for about an hour and a half, and amazing shit happens. My dad was a psychiatrist. My degree's in psychology. I was on a track to get a PhD in psychology. And when I discovered breathwork after my first session, I jumped tracks. I never went for the PhD because it works so fast and heals so profoundly in so many ways. 30 years later, I've yet to come across anything that heals past trauma as effectively and as quickly and in so many levels.
Yeah, I think 9 times I've done holotropic breathwork, which very similar, if not the exact thing you're talking about. It's 90-minute to 2-hour long, and yeah, the first time I did it, I was just completely blown away, and it was the first time. So I've attempted suicide multiple times, and this breathwork session, I finally mourned it. Like I was in tears. I mourned and recognized that I had survived attempted murder, and that I was attempting to murder myself. And
Andy.
The next day, I sent a bouquet of roses to my mother and to my father and to myself, as just some sort of action. But it was like that's what really started, and I could mourn it and I could grieve it. And I, in the breathwork experience, I was tasting the highs of life and just having an amazing time. And then I would crash because I tried to throw this away. Like it was just it was the most bipolar experience I ever had, but it was also incredibly healing. And I found that each of our own inner healer, inner wisdom comes out in breathwork somehow and soothes and heals. So
it's amazing how it works. And thank you, by the way, for so much for sharing that. It's so moving, that visual. And I'm so sorry that I totally relate. I never tried, but I certainly had the fantasy throughout my entire adolescence. So my heart goes out to you and celebrate with you that you breathed your way out of that.
Yeah, and there's one big thing about awareness. Once I was willing to be wrong about everything I thought was right, that's what opened the door for me.
Yeah.
So and so many men, like, it's more important to be right than be happy, and that's totally reversed.
which, by the way, goes back to the ego. That's one of the functions of the ego. Is one of the shenanigans of the ego is it thinks that it's right always. And like you're pointing to is like, even if we are right, who cares? Like, so much of our identity is tied into being right. It's like, what is that? What is that? To me, that's part of that symptom of overcompensating, because deep down inside, we don't feel good enough. So we attach and hold on to more superficial expressions, like being right. And that's going to give me meaning. And then when somebody challenges that, then I take it as a challenge to my very foundation of my deepest identity. It's like, no, man, it's okay to be wrong once in a while. It doesn't mean anything about you.
Yeah. So again, kind of mixed up in all of this notion of mass and wanting to be right. And when we first spoke, you had shared an experience of self-sabotage in high school. And I had done very similar, the same thing. So might you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. One of the things about being an introvert was that I was a good student. And especially coming to a different country, a country in which I didn't speak the language, and having been raised in Cuba where we had a TV, but there was nothing worth watching, I grew up reading. So I had an ease with learning, had a propensity for learning. So I had a 4.0 in high school, except for 1B. My last semester. I think it was the next to last the semester as a senior. And I didn't set out to do this consciously, but looking back on it, I know I don't have the slightest doubt that I sabotaged my GPA, because it was a self-guided study. All I had to do was read a book and do a book report, which I've done a ton of. But I turned it in late, and that was enough for me to get a B instead of an A. And that was enough for me to knock me out of the running to be the valedictorian, because there is no freaking way that I could have gotten up then in front of an auditorium filled with hundreds and hundreds of people and speak. There's no way. No way I could have done that. And flash forward, now I speak all over the world. Speaking at dozens and dozens of universities and conferences and on the TEDx stage. So I know, from personal experience in my cells, that all this stuff, these fears that we have allowed to hold us back, that all can be healed and all can be transcended. Yeah.
Yeah. I find the things that I've been most fearful of and terrified of the longest are the things I need to do and that just make life better. And, I dropped out of college to avoid a mandatory public speaking class. I just stopped going, went from A's to F's and was incomplete and kicked out. I was like, oh, thank God. It was all to avoid a class that I was afraid of. And in high school, midway through senior year, the class rankings came out and I was third in my class. Wow. I was like, what the fuck? How can this be? Like I was in the advanced classes, but I was not trying. The other one was trying to get valedictorian, trying to do this and doing things for the college applications. And I was depressed and miserable. And I didn't realize till later how afraid I was. So wow. I was afraid to go to college and be discovered as a fraud. I thought I was ranked third in my class because I was just the chief idiot in a sea of morons. Like I thought that was it. I was just like the third ranked of this town of idiots. That's really how I saw. And again, I blame everybody else because I couldn't accept what I thought of myself.
Wow.
Right. But
that's powerful,
so
Andy.
I consciously tried to flunk out of high school so I would not graduate.
That's amazing. It's amazing the things we do, and most of it not even consciously. To me, that's the saddest part. I didn't do this. I didn't set out to do this, and you didn't set out to do this. We were just being driven by under the surface. We weren't even aware of the deep-seated, deep-rooted feelings of lack of self-love. And like that imposter syndrome, that if they really knew me, they would see how stupid I am or how fill in the blank I am. And all of it, that's the tragic part. All of it is just a misunderstanding.
Yeah. And it's all fixable, malleable, changeable.
Yes.
Yeah. Because even the man who insists on not feeling and denying emotions, I find that they are living in the most fear. Because it's fear of anyone thinking that they have a heart, that they feel, that they're soft, that they might ever cry. It's fear of anyone knowing their truth that keeps them living a lie.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I think it's another aspect of that is, that we think that to show feelings is feminine because little boys don't cry. Well, why is that? Because only little girls cry? It's like, wait a minute. Let's look at that, because there's some faulty premises in that. One is that the emotions are weakness. It's like, wait a minute, emotions are not weakness. They're not strength either. They're not good. They're not bad. They're just energy. Depending on how we express them, they have a good or a not so good effect. But the emotion itself is just an energy. And then that the assumption that the feminine is weakness. It's like, wait a minute, you want to talk power, courage, resilience, ability to withstand pain? Let's talk about the power of creation that resides in a female body. And I think of this story of, from Betty White, who left us about a year ago. And in her unique way, I think the story goes something like this. She was being interviewed in one of those TV shows with multiple celebrities. So there was a discussion going on, and somebody said something about having balls. And she goes, wait just a minute. Where do we get this association that with balls and having courage or strength? You thump those little things and the guy collapses, bends over in severe pain. You want to talk courage? You want to talk strength? Let's talk vaginas. Those things take a pounding.
Yeah. That's it's so true, and just shows like how far back our distorted thinking goes, and what we've been taught. And again, that's going back to the generations I'm seeing younger than ours. They're waking up. They're recognizing these falsehoods much quicker.
Yes.
So again, I really back the best of times, the worst of times. We really are at the potential for this dawn of a new time for all humans, and men especially, to be able to lead the way from a soulful power, not an egoic one, not a power over things, but a powerful ability to open up.
That's right. Power with. Yeah. Like, if I'm in my power, why would I possibly be threatened by you being in your power? I can celebrate that. I can share that. I can honor that. It's like, I know who I am. Yeah. Cool. I can handle whatever you throw my way.
So Awakening the Soul of Power, you say it's book 1 in a Calling All Heroes series.
Correct.
So can you give any teasers about what's to come? What do you have in plan for the rest of this?
Book 2, which I just committed. I just facilitated a New Year's virtual retreat. And I committed to finish book 2 this year. I'm about 50% done. And because writing is what I resist the most, what I procrastinate on the most. All right, but I made the commitment, and I'm recommitting here publicly. So that one is on relationships, like how to do relationships consciously. And I think because most of us, that's the area where we give away our power. And the book is about all relationships, but is going to have a particular focus on romantic, intimate relationships. And so what does it mean to have them consciously? And so if you are in a relationship and you've got the basic human needs for love and sex and companionship and family and all that good stuff, then what? How do we use that container of the relationship to fast track our own process of healing and transformation, which is what we're here for ultimately? I hope everybody listening to this or watching this now knows that there isn't anybody out there who's going to make us happy. Not going to happen. And it's not their job to. If that's how we're approaching a relationship, you're going to make me happy, forget it. Hang it up. It's not going to happen. And how unfair to put that responsibility on somebody else. Not even fair. So only we can make ourselves happy, obviously. And so then if you're not in a relationship and would like to be, how do we identify and release the subconscious patterns that have us sabotaging our relationships sometimes before they get go? By attracting people, by falling for people who are not a match, who are not available. They're already with somebody else, or they live on the other side of the world, or they're just not there. So what's going on with that? Why, if we say we want relationship, why do we end up doing this? Like, come here, but not too close, right? And so we look at what's going on under the surface so that we can clear those subconscious patterns. And stop blocking love in our lives.
I love the work you're doing. Powerful conversation. It's a powerful book. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend people experience breath work, because when I first experienced that, I thought, if we brought this to high schools, drug use would stop, because the power to have these amazing experiences and visualizations and just have the trippiest experience they've ever had came from my own breath, and that just continues to amaze me.
Yes.
But so, Christian, what's the best way for people to learn more about you and the book and everything you've got going on?
Well, if they want to find out more about breath work, my TEDx talk is on the power of the breath. So just Google the power of the breath, or look it up on YouTube. In terms of the book is available wherever you want to, wherever books are sold. So if you want to support your local bookstore, order it there. If you want to, if not, you just get it on Amazon or any of those online websites that sell books. In terms of reaching me, probably my website is the best way to do that. And once they go there, they can access my social media. The website is soulfulpower.com, SOULFUL.com. I mean, power.com. And then for your audience, anybody who goes and gets on my email list, and we know how easy it is to click unsubscribe if it doesn't work for you down the road. But anybody who gets on our email list, we'll send them a sample chapter of the book, and it happens to be the one that talks about what it means to live heroically in the 21st century. So going back to your very first question, we'll send them some power practices, so designed to integrate the teaching so they don't stay at the level of information, because we don't need more information. We've got information overload. What we need is transformation, and that only comes from really applying and living from a set of teachings. And then we'll send them a meditation. I did a short teaching and I got a meditation on how to find trust, how to move to a place of trust during these times in which we live of chaos and fear and uncertainty.
Well, thanks again so much, Christian, for sharing what you're up to with us, getting the book out there, sharing your life experiences, because you're exactly the kind of man I love to talk to on Real Men Feel, a man willing to share what he's gone through and then share how he's being of service to the world. And we all have the potential to be of service to the world, and it starts with serving yourself.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So get out of the ego, get into your soul. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for everyone for listening. Wherever you're discovering Real Men Feel, please do all the things the platform allows you to do, like, follow, subscribe, share, comment, whatever it is you can do there. We appreciate the support. You can always reach out to me at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Always glad to hear from you. And until next time, be good to yourself, love yourself, and be willing to be the hero in your life.